Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. The sports universe intensifies as we've hit the middle of May, and I'm here to break it all down for you as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with Joe JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard, and for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back, and here we are. We're getting close to closing out the second round in both the NBA and NHL. We already have some teams that have advanced. One team in the NHL, that be the Edmonton Oilers, and there's some pressure regarding some of the top teams that are left with 3-1 deficits, or in another case, a 3-2 deficit, a team that was up 2-0 in the Toronto Maple Leafs, but we'll get to that in the next segment. But right now with the NBA, we have both the Pacers and the Timberwolves moving on to a conference final for the second year straight. Think about it. Minnesota played Dallas, as you know, last year before losing to them, and Indiana gets swept by Boston. And here they are back in the same point that they were last year with the other two teams in each conference standing. And you have to wonder whether or not we're going to see a seventh game. And I'm sure Adam Silver and the powers that be down on Fifth Avenue in the NBA offices, they are praying, hoping with fingers and eyes crossed that the Denver Nuggets tonight and the Boston Celtics tomorrow could push their series to a seventh game, because as I talked about on Monday, it looked like this was going to be a complete dud or even thud of a second round. And as of right now, you have a little bit of intrigue. And I'll start off with my beloved Boston Celtics because, boy, this has been one of the most emotional, if not probably the darkest days of being a Celtic fan. And yes, that may even include Len Bias. That may even include Reggie Lewis. And to a certain degree, Paul Pierce when he got stabbed, and obviously not knowing the fate of his health, and thank goodness he was able to come out of that, and we know the type of career he's had. But here it was, Monday night in a pivotal Game 4 where the Celtics came back into the series on Saturday in typical Celtic dominant defensive and shooting prowess that we've seen throughout the course of these last couple of years with the C's. And then now on Monday, when it was back and forth, Celtics had another 14-point lead. Yes, it wasn't 20, but it was double digit there in the third quarter before Jalen Brunson took over. And then the next thing you know, they went past the Celtics standing still. They played terribly defensively. Not a good game by Jaylen Brown. Even awful game by Kristaps Porzingis. And it was all Jason Tatum. Now you had Derek White in the first half, who shot the lights out of the ball but cooled off considerably in the second half. And with Tatum going mano-a-mano with Jalen Brunson, and then the key point of the game, which certainly turned and marred the game, let's face it, with the Knicks slowly but surely going away at 111-104 with about 2:58 to go. And then you had the scenario where Jaylen Brown, who looked like he was trying to pass the ball to Tatum, it was deflected, stolen by OG Anunoby, and in the process of trying to reach for the ball, the step that was taken by Tatum, his right Achilles gave out. He crumples to the garden floor. Next thing you know, he has to be carried off. And we couldn't even see a replay at first, which I thought was a terrible job by ESPN, because here was Tatum on the floor. He actually called a timeout. You didn't know if it was his knee, ankle, etc. But when you saw the replay, and not that I'm a doctor, and not that by any stretch being at home thinking that, oh, this was an Achilles, but we've seen this injury so many times here in recent memory, whether it was Damian Lillard in the first round of this year's playoff, obviously Kevin Durant in the finals against Toronto. We've seen this multiple times. Kobe Bryant many years ago, if you recall. Now, I understand it wasn't the same exact way that they injured their Achilles, but surely when you see them on the court and in a case where everybody was cool and calm, if you're Damian Lillard or even Kobe, where I get it, Tatum was in just excruciating pain, but my gut told me that based on his reaction, based on him being wheeled off in the wheelchair and just having his head in the towel, knowing that this was going to be curtains for him, not only for the rest of this series, but also obviously all of next year, which we'll get to whenever the Celtics season ends, and it could end tomorrow night, as we know. But that was just forget about a gut punch. That was a kick to the groin. That was one that you knew that the Celtics were going to face an uphill battle trying to get back and even win this series after losing there in Game 4. And with the impending doom of this injury, and officially was announced there on Tuesday where he already had the surgery and looks like he wants to be on the comeback trail quick, fast, in a hurry. But then last night, what can you say? It was just a total team effort. Tremendous performance by Jaylen Brown, who certainly had to make amends for what he, in his performance on Monday night, and had a complete game, 26-12, 8 rebounds, played defense, got Jalen Brunson in foul trouble and fouled him out of the game, which was imperative for the Knicks not to come back, where the Celtics had another 20-point deficit. And I certainly was holding my breath because there was no way that if they would have blown that game last night, I mean, who knows? I would have been 10 times as despondent as I would have been last week at this time when I was in front of this microphone after an 0-2 series deficit and just a pathetic shooting performance by the Celtics in those first 2 games. But the combination of Brown, Derek White with a bunch of threes, similar to what he did at the start of Game 4, was hot, got themselves rolling offensively. And then you had Luke Cornett, who came in for Kristaps Porzingis, who Porzingis had respiratory issues with a cold. He couldn't breathe out there. It was evidenced by his 12 minutes and 1 point, and I believe 1 rebound. But I don't want to get on Porzingis if he wasn't feeling well. But I mentioned this yesterday on the live stream. Every Wednesday, 12 noon Eastern time on YouTube. Check me out. I go on live. I interact with the fans. It's a good time. But for me, how I thought about the rest of this series as of yesterday, Porzingis was going to be the guy that was going to have to pick up a tremendous amount of slack with Jason Tatum's absence. And not to say he has to perform anything close to what Tatum had done, but we needed a lot more from Porzingis than what we've already gotten from him throughout the course of this postseason. And as it was, you only got the 1 point, but Luke Cornett defensively was stellar. 7 blocks to go along with 10 points, 9 rebounds. Again, a total team effort. Add in Peyton Pritchard, add in Sam Hauser, who came back in the lineup and got a few threes. 22 threes in all, and having Hauser in the lineup is going to give them a little bit of a lift because that's going to have to piecemeal the offense that's going to be missing from Jason Tatum. So, right, if you get whatever Peyton Pritchard's going to give you, obviously Sam Hauser, Drew Holiday with a couple of threes, they're going to need as much offensive firepower that they could get from their role players that can make up from the loss of what Tatum would have given you if he was healthy and in the lineup. So now it leads to Game 6, and tomorrow night is the pressure on the Knicks to win this game. I don't know if they would look at it that way. I mean, it's easy to say that as a fan, considering that they are at home, and I don't think there'll be any pressure going into the game. And I think even if they happen to fall behind double digits, as we've seen, whether it be Games 1 and 2 in Boston or as we saw in Game 4, I don't think there'll be any panic. Now, the pressure will be on them when the series, I shouldn't say when, if the series does shift back to Boston come Monday night. And that's going to be a big boon if that were to be the case. The reason being is because it gives the Celtics an extra day of rest. And if the Knicks were to lose on Friday night, it gives them an extra day to ponder. And maybe the pressure will start to mount even more, knowing that this series looked like it was going to be over after what you saw there on Monday night, considering that they won the game. They were up 3-1, no Jason Tatum. And now they'll have to sit on it for another 24 hours. There's no 48-hour turnaround. But for the Knicks, and we have to get to that point, I understand. But since I will not be back until Monday's podcast, and who knows how this is all going to shake down, but I can only hope as a lifelong diehard Celtic fan that I could sit in front of this camera and microphone on Monday, hoping that there is a Game 7 and that there will be a Game 7 that I can even talk about. But for Game 6, I don't think there's any pressure on the Knicks, or even for the Celtics for that matter, based on the recent events here, losing their best player. But if the Celtics were to bring that same energy and have that defensive intensity, as well as, hey, if you make 22 threes like they did last night, or come anything close to that, they're going to have a good shot to win this game. So how I look at it is that, to me, this game is going to be predicated on one thing. If the Celtics don't show up defensively, the Knicks are going to win this game. Obviously, that's not going out on a limb. Do I think it's going to be a close game? I think it will. I can see the Knicks pulling away late, similar to what we saw there on Monday. But with the championship DNA and their pride that they showcased last night, and I'm sure they're going to rally around that, knowing that if they perform more so defensively, because you would think that the shots would fall, and them to make threes, not to say they're going to make 22, but if they can make anywhere between 15 to 18, they should still be in the game. And the other key thing that we didn't see early on in the series, which I thought was huge last night, was how the Knicks attacked Jalen Brunson on the defensive side of the ball. We saw that in games 1 and 2 where Jason Tatum had Brunson on him and he didn't attack. And that was the one thing. The Celtics didn't settle last night. And as long as they are in attack mode and they're not settling for three and hero ball, and even with a double-digit lead, let's just try to pile on by shooting threes. No. Attack the paint. If Mitchell Robinson is not there, there's no rim protector. And you saw a lot of that. You saw a lot of Drew Holiday cutting to the basket. You saw Derek White. You saw a lot of playmaking that we did not see in the first 4 games of the series. So hopefully Joe Mazzulla finally got it, that the light bulb went off. And now that he realizes that as long as we have some matchups that we can exploit, that we can attack that way, as opposed to trying to just get ourselves even in a bigger lead by shooting three, or trying to come from behind by just shooting threes. So let's see if that's going to stick, because if that does stick, there is a chance that Boston could go back home with a Game 7 in their building. And if that's the case, I'll talk about that then on Monday. But tomorrow night is going to be a very interesting setting. That Garden is going to be rocking. They're going to sense that and try to will the Knicks to a win, because the last thing I want to do is to watch a game on Monday night. And yeah, so many Knicks fans in the building last night, and I get it. They were waiting for a coronation, and thankfully that did not happen. But I can only imagine if it does go to a 7th game, you're going to have a ton of Knicks fans go up there. It's going to be blue and orange throughout. And I'm saying this to the Celtic fan who has season tickets or has tickets. I'm sure they're going to go to the game. They're going to try to block out as many Knicks fans as possible. But again, we'll have to wait to get there in order to see if that's going to happen. But one more time, since I'm not having a podcast between now and Monday, I bring it up now. Now, of course, check the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ for shorts, especially an instant reaction after the game on Friday night. You didn't get one last night from me. You got it this morning, only because the game was out of reach, and the Celtics obviously did what they did. They won by 20-some-odd points. What was it, 127-102, so 25 points. So to me, there was no need to have an instant reaction. But considering Celtics, backs against the wall, an elimination game, if they fall and not push to a Game 7, you'll get my instant reaction then. So that's what we have. And hopefully the Knicks and Celtics, I think that's going to be a good game. Do I think the Knicks are going to win? My gut's going to tell me yes. But if the Celtics have any pride and any just of that championship DNA without their best player, they could push it to a 7th game. I would not be shocked. And the Celtics play well on the road. You got to remember that too. 33-8, and I understand the record without Tatum in the lineup is now 9-2 this year, although now 3-2 against opponents that were 500 or better. Listen, anything can happen. Of course, my gut's going to tell me that the Knicks are going to win, because they do not want to get back on a plane to go to Boston there Monday night. So, and I'm not doing any reverse jinx type of psychological nonsense. So, I would think the Knicks will win. I think the Celtics will be in the game, but it's just a matter of how they're going to execute. If they're going to come anything close to last night, I think they're going to win the game. If they're going to have these lapses and Brunson's going to be having 18-point quarters and have 39 in the game, and obviously not be that guy that's just going to have that killer instinct throughout the whole game, and the Celtics are going to be on the heels, then they're going to have no shot. So that's how I look at that series there as we move it along. And then you have tonight where OKC and Denver. And similar to the Celtic-Knicks series, I would think that Denver, they're going to do whatever it takes to win this game. Now, mind you, unlike the Celtics series where they have to go to New York, come here, I should say, to play on the road in Game 6, Denver has Game 6 in their building. And what's fascinating is that if they do win this game, Game 7 is not Saturday night. It is Sunday afternoon. So they do get an extra day, which bodes well for the Nuggets, because as we all know, they do not have a bench. They're pretty much playing 6.5 players. You have Nikola Jokic playing big-time minutes, is tired at the end of these games, and now with the mile-high altitude, which they're accustomed to playing in, but does OKC, do they put down the hammer here and close out the series, which I think would be a statement? And the reason why I say that before I get back to Denver, the reason why I say that is because this team, as we know, last year, they didn't get out of this round. They lost to Dallas. They won a big Game 4, as you know. And then obviously they win game 5, where it was pretty close throughout, but the Thunder end up going away. But to me, how I look at this game tonight, OKC will really tell me something about their team if they go to Denver. Not that they have to blow them out, but if they win, whether it be a close game or even if they win convincingly a 111-100 type game. Because as a young team, gaining experience, watching them grow up right in front of our eyes, we saw what they did last year as a 1 seed. They weren't able to get out of the second round. And then this year, when they absolutely had to win a game for down 2-1, which they did do so, they took care of home court there on Tuesday night. And then now they have an opportunity to close out the series, to not let Denver get back in and not have to worry about that extra day off, that even though it would help OKC, but I think it would benefit more of the Nuggets based on their lack of depth and not being able to have that extra day where the 48-hour turnaround, although they're accustomed to, but who knows what they're going to have left if they do win the night. And knowing that they have an extra day, who knows? That may give them an extra pep in their step, and certainly all the pressure. I mean, you talk about enormous pressure would be on the Thunder for them to win that game Sunday afternoon at 3:30. But tonight, I like Denver in the game. Obviously, those games have been nip and tuck. They've been very close in games 3 and 4. And I would expect a big-time performance there by Nikola Jokic, who shot terribly in those 2 games at home earlier in the series. And with the big game that he had the other night, 44 and 15, I would think that the crowd, which is a very good crowd in Denver, on top of maybe some of the role players stepping up, making a contribution. I know Russell Westbrook, although very spirited and very competitive, but he has not shot well with the ball, and not to say he's all of a sudden going to turn around and shoot 7 for 11, but maybe knowing that this could be his last game in Denver with the Nuggets and maybe being inspired to kind of push them and put OKC on the brink there for a game 7 on top of guys like Michael Porter Jr. We know Aaron Gordon, he's made big-time contributions, so they're going to need that in order for them to get to Oklahoma City for a game 7. But I think the Nuggets will do just enough tonight. I think Nikola Jokic will play a lot better in this game at home than he did in the previous games at home in the series, and therefore you'll see a game 7. Would I be surprised if OKC closes it out tonight? I would not. But like I said before, it would be a statement if they go in there, win a game 6, because it'll make you think that, this team, not only did it come to play, which is no surprise, but they came to close out a team on the road that knows how to win, that has already won big games in this postseason, back in the Clippers series, and then obviously winning game 1 in OKC, winning a game 3 in their building in overtime. But now they're going to need this in order to survive and live to see another day. So fascinating game tonight. And I hope Denver pushes it to a game 7. Like I mentioned, Adam Silver, I'm sure, again, as he's saying his prayers over a meal, and as he wakes up this morning with his coffee and bagel, thinking that, I just hope Denver could win this game tonight so we could have a game there on Sunday, ABC, and then the same for tomorrow night where the Celtics and Knicks, if the Celtics prevail, they will go ahead and play a game 7 there Monday night on TNT. Now, as far as the other 2 series, what more is there to say about the Pacers and the T-Wolves? And I'll start with them first and then go to the losers. Indiana, just like we talked about, a team that prior to the series, a lot of people thought it was going to be Cleveland in 7, or maybe even in 6 for that matter, considering what they did to Miami. And as you've heard before, to me, that was more of an indictment on how bad Miami was than how good Cleveland was. But with the Cavaliers, after that shellacking that you saw there on Sunday night, and then here they were, they had a very good first quarter, and they were up by 10 with about 4.5 minutes to go in the second quarter until Tyrese Halliburton went on a heater, shooting 4 threes, and that carried on into the third quarter where they went past the Cavaliers standing still, and the Pacers behind Halliburton's 31. And I understand he's been up and down in this series as far as the stat sheet goes, but it doesn't matter because now they dispose of the Cavaliers. They win the series in 5, and now they just sit and wait. And I'm sure they're hoping that the Celtics give the Knicks another long, tough run for their money and maybe even puts it to a 7th game where it could go 50 overtimes, because they are sitting pretty right now with a bunch of rest and time off where I'm sure, listen, they just disposed of the Cavaliers, so it wasn't as if they had a rock fight or a long 5-game series where it was emotional. Yes, you had some fisticuffs there. I don't want to say fisticuffs, but you had that bit of a fracas in Game 4 with Benedict Mathurin and DeAndre Hunter. But this is a team, as solid as they are and at times spectacular, they are going to be, I would think, even in the next round, they're going to be the favorites to win that series. People could say, well, the Knicks will have the home court, and if the Celtics do happen to win this series, they'll have the home court as well, but we know no Jason Tatum. But I would think Indiana's the favorite. And I wouldn't be surprised if Indiana is going to have that next step, considering last year they got to the conference finals and got swept by the Celtics, and now maybe this is time for them to take that next leap. So we have plenty of time to talk about it until we close out the other series in the East, but Indiana is looking sharp as a tack. And they are going to be a tough out, no matter who they play, whether it be in the conference finals or beyond. And as far as the Cavaliers, I'm sorry. I know Donovan Mitchell gave it his all. He had, 35 points in the game. Now, he did shoot 25 times or 23 attempts. He did have 21 trips to the free throw line and sunk 15. But the Evan Mobleys, and I get it that Darius Garland, he gave you all he had. But if you're playing in the game, and you're giving maximum effort, when you shoot 4 for 18, that is not a big-time performance. In fact, that is very small. And what can you say? Listen, he gave it his all, he tried, etc., and nobody's going to confuse Darius Garland with a very efficient point guard who's going to shoot at a high percentage. But you had to get more from him, and obviously you didn't get that. And I hate to say it this way, but I have to call it like I see it. The Cavaliers were frauds this year. You don't win 64 games, and that was more of a regular season achievement for them to have the 1 seed, to perform the way they did all year long, and I get it. Yours truly included. Everybody was looking forward to Celtics Cavaliers in a conference final to see how they would match up against one another, considering they were the top 2 teams in the East. And as it is, as of right this very moment, the Cavs are already planning their Cancun vacations, and the Celtics could not be, or could be right behind them as early as tomorrow night, sometime around 11 p.m. So for Cleveland, and I get it, Donovan Mitchell was as optimistic in the post-game press conference saying that we'll be back, and I know it's tough and it sucks, etc., but we'll be back. I don't know about that. We need to see more from the Cavaliers. We need to see more consistency. Last year they won, 50 games, and this year they took a big leap. Now, what are they going to do? They're going to go from 64 to 67? I don't think so. You would think they're going to come back to the pack. Who knows what's going to happen with the rest of the East? Obviously, no Jason Tatum next year. Will the Sixers get better? They're going to have the number 3 pick overall. Not to say that they're going to all of a sudden pay dividends, but you think they're going to improve. Who knows what's going to happen with Milwaukee? You would think the Knicks, if they do get past this round and fall short in the next round, I'm sure they're going to try to bring in another player to try to get them over the hump into the finals. So the East right now is a big giant question mark. So if you're the Cavaliers, yes, you could have a carbon copy where you could be a 1 seed, but are you going to be that team that's going to go off on a 15-0 run to start the year, that's going to have 2 15-game winning streaks, that's going to have 60-plus wins in your back pocket and get back to the same point next year? I'm not going to say that. So that's just a bitter end. I'm sorry. Losing in 5? And I get it. The Pacers are a tough team. They are a team that's long, that's deep, that has a lot of scoring capability, but you had to do better. If you would have lost in 7, I still would have killed you, but at least it went 7. You lost in 5 and got embarrassed in Game 4. I mean, there isn't anything else to add to that. Sorry. And then you have in the West with Minnesota, and I don't know what Julius Randle's been drinking, but boy, did he have a series that nobody expected. And he's had a very good playoff overall. Let's call it like you see it. Now, I don't know what Chris Finch has done to kind of put Randle in a scenario where he has been not a 2 guy. He's been a 1A to Anthony Edwards and what he's done. And Anthony Edwards, as we all know, has just been lights out. And I get it. A lot of the talk about who he's disposed to over the last 2 postseasons, whether your name is Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, whether your name is in this postseason with LeBron and Luka, and now here in this series disposing, I understand no Steph Curry, but with Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, and of course in the second round last year with Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. But Right, that's all well and good, but what has that gotten them? They haven't gone to a final. They haven't won anything. So for everybody to start throwing the bouquets at Anthony Edwards' feet, and give him credit, the guy is a great player. But when we see these memes about who he's disposed in the postseason, all right, but what has that gotten him? That doesn't even get him a medal. So let's pipe down with who he's beaten. Now let's see him get to a final, which should be interesting because if they do face OKC, or even Denver for that matter, because that'll be a rematch of the round 2 of last year. But I think OKC Minnesota is what a lot of people would like to see where Ant was going to stack up against SGA. But for Minnesota, I get it. With no Steph Curry, and you still got to give them credit, the way they performed was outstanding. And right now, they're on a roll. They're a team that has a lot of confidence, led by Ant-Man, and now they're back in the same spot that they were last year, and you got to give them kudos. So for those who were thinking that Ant-Man is going to now take that next step, well, he's about to face it because he's going to either go up against a team that he beat last year, or against a team that a lot of people think are going to go to a final and win. So there isn't any much else that I could add other than the T-Wolves just took care of the Warriors. Warriors did not have, I'm not going to say they didn't have any fight. I won't go as far as saying that. But when you don't have your best player, A, and B, you don't have a lot of scoring after Jimmy Butler, who, let's face it, Jimmy Butler, the playoff Jimmy moniker is done. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to see it. I don't care in the offseason what he says about playoff Jimmy. Dating back to last year, if he was healthy, he would have beaten the Knicks and the Celtics and all that. That is over. Everybody has their playoff moments. We get that. But if you're a playoff Jimmy, last night you can't be 4 of 11 for 17 points. And I don't care how they defend you. I don't care if Anthony Edwards threw a blanket over you. You find a way. You find a way to put up 28, 30, 32, 34 points, even in a losing effort. Even if you have to shoot 24, 26, 28 times. I mean, Jimmy Butler is a very good player. He is not an upper echelon, top 15, top 20 player. I'm sorry. And I like Jimmy Butler. I don't want to just all of a sudden throw ice cold water on him or the Warriors for that matter. But this playoff Jimmy moniker and what he's done in the past and the 50-point games against the Bucks and the bubble against the Lakers, everybody has their playoff moment. That's been a big-time player. But I need to see it game in, game out. And Buddy Hield, where have you gone? Buddy Hield, who, I get it, Game 7 had 9 for 11 from 3. Game 1, a big one for that matter, when Steph was out. And Jonathan Kuminga was your guy that actually stepped in. And who knows, there may be a situation where they would have to keep Kuminga. I think the Warriors would be stupid to trade him. But who knows, maybe in order to bring back Steph Curry healthy at age 37, with Butler at age 36 and Draymond, maybe they want to bring in another veteran player, which means they'll have to dangle Kuminga in the offseason to bring back another guy that's going to see whether or not they can push him to the next round and beyond. And I get it that Steve Kerr came out and said that, if we had a healthy Steph, we would have made a finals run. That I highly, and again, he's going to say that he's a coach. What is he going to say? Oh no, we wouldn't have made it past the second round. He's going to say that, but as fans, I beg to differ. I didn't think that they would have had a long postseason run. I think they would have gotten destroyed by OKC based on their size, based on their depth, etc., and their youth. And I get it, not a lot of inexperience, but we're seeing a different OKC team this year than we did last. So I wouldn't have looked at that from a standpoint that, automatically Golden State would have been in the finals. Not this guy. But between Cleveland and what they're going to do this offseason to try to get better, to get past the next round, and Golden State, it's a loaded West, as you know, headlined by OKC. Houston, who knows what they're going to do in the offseason. Maybe they bring in Giannis. San Antonio with the second pick overall. You would think that they're going to be better. Dallas now will have Cooper Flagg. Not that they're going to make any type of instant impact because Kyrie isn't going to come back until the end of next year with the ACL. But Dallas is going to be a force to be reckoned with down the road. And I'm not even including Minnesota, where you know that they're not going anywhere. The Lakers, their last stand with LeBron and obviously with Luka, considering that LeBron has one more year left, and you would think that that's at age 41. I mean, what's he going to play until he's 100? So I would think LeBron is going to have one more year of him being at a 41-year-old at his best, scoring 24 points a game and 7 rebounds and assists. So Golden State, they're getting older by the second and not getting any younger or better. So let's see what's going to happen with those two teams, but in particular Golden State, as I'm talking about them now, on whether or not they're going to be part of this mix in the playoffs. And remember, they got in the play-in. So if they're going to be in the top 6, that's going to be better off for them as opposed to having to go the long route with the play-in. And as I mentioned a second ago with Dallas, I talked about it on Monday with the lottery. And there were 3 teams that I looked at as far as, I'm not going to say wild cards because it's ping pong balls, but 3 teams that I thought that could be in play to get the number 1 pick if things were to be upended. And as it was, it sure turned out that way with 2 of the teams. The other team I had was Brooklyn because I thought Brooklyn, maybe somehow the ping pong balls will fall their way. As I mentioned, Monday, they went by the KG and Paul Pierce route in 2013 to see if they could transform their team that way. Didn't work out. And then obviously with the Kyrie KD 6 years later, try to transform their team that way, didn't work out. So maybe the ping pong balls would have fell the right way where they got Cooper Flag to go along with the guys that they have on their team and build their team that way. Obviously, Brooklyn was nowhere near. They're going to draft 8th. But as the team started to click off and you saw Washington get picked, I think they're picking, 6, and then Utah picking 5, and I'm thinking, oh, geez. So when you had the top 4 as Dallas, San Antonio, Philadelphia, and Charlotte, I said to myself, based on PTSD, I get it's almost 30 years ago with Tim Duncan, watch San Antonio get the number 1 pick because they got the number 1 pick with Wembanyama. And think about in the 20 teens where the Cleveland Cavaliers had, in 4 years, 3 first-round picks or number 1 overall. Kyrie, Anthony Bennett, and Andrew Wiggins. Now, Bennett turned out to be nothing. Kyrie, we already know what his career's been about. And Andrew Wiggins was traded for Kevin Love when LeBron went back to Cleveland. But how I looked at it was, watch San Antonio now be back in dynasty mode in the years to come, where you have Cooper Flag and Victor Wembanyama to go along with De'Aaron Fox and Stephon Castle, the reigning Rookie of the Year. But thankfully, that did not come to pass. But when, out of the Final 4, the envelope for Charlotte, I said, oh, geez, it's going to be San Antonio. And then when it was Philadelphia next, I said, I hope it goes to Dallas. And then that's when it struck me. I said to myself, the basketball gods are looking out for the Mavericks. And sure enough, the number 2 pick, San Antonio. I'm sure you heard a roaring applause from the South, living where I'm at in the Northeast, when you saw the video of Nico Harrison jumping up out of his chair when the Mavericks got the first overall pick. You talk about karma, for whatever the reason, shining on him, thinking that you traded away your franchise player on February 1st and being crucified and vilified for the last 2.5 months. And the basketball god said, you know what? I'm going to give you a mulligan. Here is your get out of jail free card. And now it's up to you to draft Cooper Flag. Boy, I tell you, if there's a man that has been counting his lucky stars since Monday night, it has to be Nico Harrison. And I didn't even think about the Mavericks because they had a, 1.8 chance to win the lottery. And it reminded me a little bit of the Islanders, my team, because the Islanders, when you look at the pecking order, they look like they were going to draft 10th. And the ping pong balls had it to where they're going to draft number 1 overall. Now, granted, there's not a generational player that's coming out in the NHL, although there could be a guy that they may pick that is a Long Island native, but that, I digress. But knowing that Cooper Flag is standing there, a guy that could be, dare I even say, the next Larry Bird. And for the Mavericks, with everything that they've had to deal with, all of the impromptu press conferences, let's face it, they weren't mea culpas, but in essence, they were trying to do damage control based on what happened there with Luka going to LA for Anthony Davis. And whatever it is that they tried to do, they screwed it up. And it was a lottery ticket that they just had won, but flushed down the toilet until they got another lottery ticket in a 1 Cooper Flag. You can't make it up. I mean, what more can you say? Just an unbelievable amount of luck. And now Dallas is on the clock, and you already know who they're going to select. So now let me lace up my skates and take a trip around the ice because we have a very fascinating set of games where three teams with big-time expectations are now up against it. One team is advanced to a conference final as I'm spilling my water, if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, all over my shirt. All right, let me get to Edmonton real quick just to kind of put them to rest. Give it up for the Oilers. I thought that the Golden Knights were going to win this series at 6, although I'm rooting for Edmonton. I want them to get back to a final, and I want them to win. I want to see Connor McDavid hoist the Stanley Cup trophy over his head. And who would have thought, me, when you think back in time, as a guy who hated the Oilers. Remember, I'm an Islander fan. And when the Oilers and Islanders played in the early 80s, when the Islanders won their 4th straight Stanley Cup when they swept the Edmonton Oilers that year. And then their drive for 5 when they played the Edmonton Oilers in 84. And they were down 1-0 in the series. They tied the series before going to at the time, Northlands Coliseum. And the first time that it was a 2-3-2 scenario where the Islanders had a 2-1 lead in Game 3 before Marc Messier made that move on Gordon Dineen and had turned the series on its ear. To where Edmonton just steamrolled the Islanders the last 3 games and they won the Stanley Cup. And since that time, I've hated the Oilers. Until now. Or maybe until last year. But Edmonton, give it up. They did a tremendous job on Monday night. They shut out the Golden Knights 3-0 behind the 2 goals by Adam Henrique and Stuart Skinner, who had to come in for Calvin Pickard with a lower body injury, I believe, to his leg. And Skinner, who is sketchy at best, but certainly rose to the occasion with a shutout there in game number 4. And then I thought that Vegas would win last night. I figured that they would have had some pride to bring the series back to Edmonton and maybe lose in a game 6. But, man, their offense took an early vacation, considering that the last goal that they scored was the one at 0.4 seconds in game 3, in game 4, which saved their season. And it's game 3. I got that all mixed up. My apologies, because obviously Edmonton won game 4 3-0. And then last night, with the Golden Knights not scoring a goal at all, and then you had Kasperi Kapanen in overtime score the game winner right there, a little bit of a scrum in front of the net. He was able to poke it in, and Edmonton advances to a conference final back-to-back years, 3rd time in 4 years. And now let's see, with a few days rest, and whether or not they're going to be facing Dallas for a 2nd year in a row or the Winnipeg Jets. And I will talk about that in a second, but give it up. Edmonton's done a phenomenal job here. They were down 0-2 to the Kings. They came all the way back and swept them out in the first round. And then here, they took a 2-0 series lead, lost a tough game 3, but rebounded big time with a 3-0 victory at home before winning the game in overtime in Vegas. 3 games in Vegas that they took from the Golden Knights. And Edmonton right now is looking like a team that is on a trajectory to getting back to a Stanley Cup and maybe, just maybe, winning the whole thing. Now let's get to the big picture here with 3 teams. The Washington Capitals, the Winnipeg Jets, and the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm going to start off with the Maple Leafs because they just played last night. They lost Sunday, as you know. The series was tied at 2. We talked about how is there going to be pressure on them to win this game, number 5, even though they had the home ice. And you would think that, considering how they've done at home throughout this postseason, yes, they lost a brutal game 5 in their building to Ottawa in the first round where they got shut out 4-0. And therefore won a big game 6 in Ottawa. But now, here it is. Last night, all in front of them. And what do? Not only did they not play well, they did not show up. They had guys in the game last night that scored their first playoff goal. And I don't want to knock them because I understand you don't want to get beat by the opposing team's best players, but you had guys that literally scored their first career playoff goals in these games. And Joseph Wall had to get pulled there, and you didn't see Anthony Stolarz, who knows what the status of his health is going to be moving forward. So you had the 3rd string backup goalie perform there last night to mop up for Joseph Wall. And the Maple Leafs, I'll say this. If they do not win this series, and that means, yes, if they win a game 6 in Florida, which right now is looking insurmountable, and even if they come back home and lose a game 7 at home, it's not the head coach's fault. They got to trade players. And I know Jonathan Tavares is a free agent. They shouldn't even bring him back because right now he's what? 34 years of age, I believe. He'll be 35. Let him go elsewhere. That's it. It hasn't worked out with Tavares, and actually he's had a quiet last couple of games here. So you have to wonder whether or not he'd be a guy to bring back. Mitch Marner, I would unload him. Goodbye. He's a guy that, although, yes, he performed early in the series again and did score a goal in Game 6 against Ottawa, but when the series get deeper and when the stakes get higher, the guy never shows up. Now, if you really want to make a big splash, trade Austin Matthews. I would think you want to keep him, or maybe even trade William Nylander. I get it. Austin Matthews, he's one of the top 5 players in the sport. And he's going to be a guy that you may not get back a lot for him, or you may not get equal value for a guy like that, considering that he is a 40, 50 goal scorer in his sleep. But this doesn't fall on the coach. Now, Berube, he's there his first year. Would they fire him after 1 year? I don't know, considering they had a 2-0 lead. Now, it is against the defending Stanley Cup champs, but this is an atrocity. How this team is, it's in their head. They cannot, for whatever the reason, other than the first round 2 of the last 3 years, but once it gets past that round, they can't do anything. They got swept. Well, they lost to Florida in 5 2 years ago in this round. And now with a 2-0 series lead, all right, I get it that they came back, bounced back nicely. What's going to kill them, though, is what happened in Game 3, because they had a 2-0 and 3-1 lead in that game. And granted, it was early on, but still, they weren't able to get that extra goal. They weren't able to get that third goal or that 3-goal lead. As you'll know, in hockey, when you have a 2-goal lead, that next goal is always important. Whether that means it stretches to a 3-goal lead or the team gets the next goal to come back. And as it did, we know what happened with Florida. They came back and they won in overtime on Brad Marchand. And since then, they've taken off. They won 2-0 in Game 4. And then last night, 6-1 in your home building. I don't have any hope for Toronto. I think they lose Game 6, and there has to be an overhaul. Maybe the GM gets fired. I understand you can't fire the GM without the coach, but Berube just got there. But that is just how do you not show up for these last 2 games? All right, you get shut out in a Game 4 on the road. Okay. 6-1 on top of 4-0 in a Game 5 where you're up 3-1. I get it. But still, awful job by Toronto, and I don't see them getting out alive. So I would say a lot of pressure's on them, but I think there's even more pressure on the Winnipeg Jets, and Capitals are hand in hand. And I've said this a million times, and this will probably be the last time I'll say this. What we've seen in the NBA and NHL with the top seeds, to me, they're all relatable because those are teams that have had big-time years. And in 3 of the 4 cases, where it was the Cleveland Cavaliers, Winnipeg, or Washington, they came out of nowhere. Nobody thought that Washington was going to be a top seed in the sport. A lot of people thought the Rangers were going to win that division, considering what they did last year, winning the President's Trophy, and what happened to them. Lost in the conference final. But for Washington, and the year they had, and with Ovechkin and everything that transpired, with him breaking Gretzky's record, this was a magical year. And with Winnipeg, they started off 8-0 and 15-1. They were like the Cavs of the NHL, despite the fact that the Cavaliers had the second best record behind OKC. And here it was. They had to struggle, fight, tooth and nail, scratch, claw, bite, down 3-1 with a minute to go to beat the St. Louis Blues in a Game 7. And here they are. They can't even win a road game. And it was evidenced as last night. How in the hell? Connor Hellebuck. All right, nominated for a Vezina? Fine. But for league MVP? Did you see the goals he gave up last night? And they only lost 3-1, so it's not as if they got blown out like they did in St. Louis. But he gave up just awful goals. I mean, goals that I'm not going to say I could have stopped. But he gave up goals that were just literally goals that definitely could have been stopped. And give it up. Michael Granlund had the hat trick. The 3 goals, even though he had the goal 1-0, and then Nikolai Ehlers had the goal that tied the game, and then Granlund had the other 2 goals, and Dallas sat on it, and that was it. But those were just some soft goals that Hellebuyck gave up there. And then now they have a Game 5 in their building, which I think they will win. Although I would not be surprised if Dallas does happen to close it out in 5, knowing that already Edmonton has won and they're going to be waiting for them. So I would think Winnipeg, whatever pride and whatever snakes that are in Hellebuyck's head, at least they're not in his home building. But I'll give Winnipeg the respect for them to win a Game 5. Do I feel confident saying that? No. But I will say this. Game 6 in Dallas, you can forget about it. I mean, that will be game, set, match in my eyes. So Winnipeg to me is the most pressure because of Hellebuyck and everything he's done this regular season. But not that far behind is Washington. And as many times I've talked about Carolina, and I won't say so as far as, them being deep and the Indiana Pacers of the NHL, etc. But how they performed in these last 2 games in their building, shutting out the Capitals 4-0, and then 5-2, where the Capitals, where have you gone? What have you done? And I get it that they cut it to 3-2 on a goal by Ovechkin there in the 3rd period, but there was no sense of urgency. And listen, I know they had opportunities, but still, the Hurricanes, who are going to throw 4 lines at you, and they're just going to try to defend, and they do not have a lot of sex appeal, but they get the job done. And now there's a Game 5 tonight where you really have to think and wonder whether or not that the Capitals are going to get out of this series alive. Now, there's a part of me that thinks that they're going to play for pride. They're in their whole building. They have to. I mean, literally have to. And that Dallas-Winnipeg game was 2 nights ago. My apologies. They would have to win this game. And they need the game, as we all know. But do I 100% trust them? The Hurricanes have been the better team by far in this series. And I don't know what Washington has left in the tank. I'll say the home teams out of respect for what they've done in the regular season. But I say it with a lot of reluctance and not a lot of confidence. Because I would not be shocked if either Carolina or Dallas wins on the road against those 2 teams. That's how I see it. So that's what you have there with the NHL. There is a couple of coaching hires that I want to discuss. But as far as the schedule goes for the next few days, and the NBA already told you, we know about the 2 Game 7s, or 2 Game 6s tonight and Friday. And if it goes Game 7, you know it's Sunday, Oklahoma City, Denver, and then Monday night, Knicks and Celtics. But for the NHL, before I get to the coaching hires, tonight, Carolina, Washington at 7, Dallas, Winnipeg at 9:30 on TNT. Tomorrow, Toronto at Florida, TNT, 8 o'clock. And then, if necessary, Saturday, Washington and Carolina, Winnipeg at Dallas, times to be determined. And then Sunday, if there is a Game 7 in Toronto, I'm sure the time will probably be 8 o'clock. And then, if necessary, a Game 7 Monday, Carolina, Washington, Dallas, Winnipeg. And I'm sure that if those series conclude tonight, and if Toronto and Florida conclude tonight, I'm sure you'll probably have a Game 1 of a conference final on Sunday and Game 1 of the other conference final on Monday. But that we'll have to wait and see. So you know I'll be on top of that. Now, as far as the coaching hires here as of late, the Canucks, if you know Rick Tocchet, did not mutually agreed part ways with Vancouver, and it looks like he's in line to be the next coach of the Philadelphia Flyers, which I think would be a great hire. Now, it's only great because Tocchet, who played in Philadelphia for 11 years, and I've watched him play, so I know the type of player he is. He's fiery, tough, etc., which is perfect. And I get it. With John Tortorella, he's the same, in that same mold, maybe not as emotional or as outspoken as Tocchet would be. But the thing is, Tocchet knows the landscape. He knows Philadelphia. He knows this organization, the fan base, etc. That's why I think he's a great fit. Now, what has Tocchet done in his coaching career in the NHL? He hasn't done much. All right, so he coached Vancouver, and I know they had tough losses in the postseason last year to Edmonton in the conference final, losing Game 7 at home. And he has a little bit of success, but he has not been a guy. He's not like his former teammate Craig Berube that has won a Stanley Cup in St. Louis. So, although I think Tocchet, very good hire, and I hope it works out for him in Philadelphia, but not much of a resume when it comes to success. So let's see if he does get the job. And I think in all likelihood, he is going to be the hire there in Philadelphia, where parting ways with Vancouver. And now that they've inserted their head coach, who was an assistant under Tocchet, and one Adam Foote, him being the longtime defenseman of the Colorado Avalanche, winning a couple of cups. So even though he doesn't have the coaching experience, but his resume and body of work as a player certainly has championship pedigree. So let's see if that could translate from on the ice to on the bench on whether or not Adam Foote could get the most out of his players and get Vancouver, back among the ranks of the top teams in the NHL. So that's what you have when it comes to coaches. All right, now let me get into the batter's box and have at it with baseball, because there's quite a few to unpack here and quite a lot to get to, because I still have to get to the NFL schedule, and you have the second golf major teeing off pretty much as I speak in the PGA down at Quail Hollow in Charlotte, North Carolina. So yes, this is going to go well past an hour, people. So I want to try to keep it tidy but efficient. So with baseball, I have to start off with the ruling by Major League Baseball and the powers that be, being the commissioner and one Rob Manfred, how they've now reinstated Pete Rose, Shoeless Joe Jackson, among others, as eligible for the Hall of Fame. Now we can finally say, hurrah, it's about time, hooray. We could, all the Pete Rose talk over the last almost 4 decades, it could cease. Well, guess what, people? It is not. And for 3 reasons, in essence, when it comes to Pete Rose. Number one, we all understand that Pete Rose is now transitioned. He has passed as of last September. Why did Major League Baseball half-step take forever and wait until he passed? And Pete Rose had even said it when he was quoted, saying that I'll have my day in the Hall of Fame, but sadly, I'm not going to be around to witness it. And we know that Pete Rose is a Hall of Famer. We know about gambling, we know about everything. But here's problem number one. And this isn't just Major League Baseball, this is all sports. Now that gambling is so prominent in the sports universe, with the DraftKings, the MGM resorts, the FanDuels, etc., they should have put this to rest a long time ago. They should have realized that, now that we're in bed with these gambling houses, maybe we need to revisit this whole Pete Rose being in the Hall of Fame deal. Now, granted, we understand. He lied. He did everything he could to deny it. Understood. He is not a saint here. But in reference to him being in the Hall of Fame, how this was mishandled by the recent overseeing of the commissioner, and even though we could go back to Bud Selig as well, but we can only look at Rob Manfred from 2015 on, this should have been taken care of, as we all know, years ago. And to have Pete Rose have his day, Cooperstown, etc., his speeches, I understand you got to hold your nose and hold your ears, but still, he deserved that. As a player, we know the betting, he did that as a manager. So that's my problem number one. They should have done this sooner. Number two, and to me, this is egregious. This is maybe should be number one, but number two is egregious. Why are they going to wait until December 2027 to come up with a committee? And that's going to be number three. So the committee. There's going to be a committee. No baseball writers are involved. Because the writers, I'm sure, whether they have a vendetta, whether they can't stand Rose, I'm sure there's going to be some that are not going to vote for him in. But there will be a committee that they're going to, whether build, I can't find the right word, where they're going to have a say on whether or not the Pete Roses, the Shoeless Joe Jacksons of the world are going to be able to be eligible. Well, they're eligible for the Hall of Fame, but they're going to be elected into the Hall of Fame. So instead of waiting until the end of the year, where, as we all know, come January, that's when they announce for next year, the 2026 class of inductees for the Hall of Fame. No, you're not going to wait until this December or next December. You're going to have to wait 2.5 years. Seriously? We can't come up with a committee between now and December and then at that time discuss whether or not Pete Rose should be a Hall of Famer, which then it adds to the third thing. Why should there be a committee? Why can't we have a veterans committee that's on the board now, whether they can't stand Rose or not, number one, or number two, you have to come up with another committee, which to me is a joke, but we can't do that in 7 months. But now here's the ultimate slap in the face. So you mean to tell me that we have to wait 2.5 years to see whether or not Pete Rose is going to be elected into the Hall of Fame? And even then, he still has to get 75% of the vote. So that's 16. They're going to have 16 committee members. And obviously, if 12 say yes, he's going to go in the Hall of Fame. How do we know that out of those people that are going to elect Pete Rose, and I'm just going to use Rose, forget about Shoeless Joe Jackson, what if the people that are on this committee, what if you only get 11 out of the 16 votes, where he's going to fall shy of 75%? You mean to tell me that he's not going to be elected into 2027? Cut the shenanigans out. Get the committee up. Have this thing revised. Rob Manfred step in, say, why wait till 2027? And I believe a lot of that has to do with the head of the Cooperstown Baseball Hall of Fame. I believe her name is Jane. Geez, what is her name? Just talked about this yesterday on the live stream. Jane Clark, I believe that's her name. And if I have it off, my apologies. But we're going to wait 2.5 years to come up with a committee. And then at that point, we'll see whether or not Pete Rose is going to be elected at that time. And if he's not elected, then what? We're going to wait another year? We know Pete Rose is a Hall of Famer. Stop it. So between Rob Manfred taking the sweet time until Pete Rose passed, and then, all right, now we'll have him in the Hall of Fame. And I don't want to hear about the current administration being influenced by, we got to get Pete Rose in, so on and so on. Nonsense. I don't want to hear it, and I don't care. This isn't a knock on the current president. That could have been George Washington. I don't want the president chiming in on whether or not Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame. Stay out of the way. Do what you need to do as far as getting this country right, and that's it. And again, that doesn't mean it's all on the current president. It could have been Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, etc. So if you're going to think I'm singling out the current administration, I am not. This will go across the board for anybody. So put that to rest. But with that being said, this is just an absolute farce. Because we all know Pete Rose is a Hall of Famer. And to think they already half-stepped on this, now they're going to half-step more. And then at that point, it's not even going to be a guarantee whether this committee is going to elect them on the first try. What a mess. They're just dragging this on. It's dragged on 3.5, 4 decades, and now they're going to drag it on for another 2-3 years. A just complete joke. And this is, by the way, lastly, before I move on, if you go to the Hall of Fame, you're going to see Pete Rose memorabilia and videos of Pete Rose everywhere. So he is in the Hall of Fame. As it is, he just doesn't have a plaque in the Hall of Fame. So you may see his bat, you may see his cleats, you may see his uniform, you may see him diving headfirst into third base, you may see him getting his 4,192nd hit off of Eric Shaw in Riverfront. You're going to see all of it. But no, let's just wait another 3 years before we put him in the Hall of Fame. What a disaster. Now let's get on to what's happening today. Before I even talk about what is going on in the sport, I have to bring up the Subway Series, which starts tomorrow in Yankee Stadium. First of 3 games, and then you have 3 more games at Citi Field on the 4th of July weekend. So 6 games. Here it goes. The circus is going to begin. And obviously tomorrow night, Juan Soto is going to be in Yankee Stadium for the first time since he signed his blockbuster deal with the Mets. And weather permitting, I will be outside Yankee Stadium taking the temperature of the Yankee fan, as I've done before with the Met fan and their expectations for 2025, and the Knick fan for their expectations of this postseason. We know how that's going so far. So yes, more content coming your way on the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ. I had to throw it out there. Of course, as always, the shameless plug. But we know the reception is going to be Coliseum-like. And what I mean by that, he's going to be the guy in the arena where he is going to be vilified, he is going to be crucified, he is going to be booed to the high heavens. That I'm sure where I'm sitting in my living room, I'll be able to hear it when I open the window. So Soto, who for him has not had a big year. He's batting, 253, 8 homers, 20 RBIs. Nah, not the start, despite that they're 28-16. And here's the other thing. Both teams are actually good, which is rare in this Subway Series. And I understand 3 years ago the Mets were in first place throughout the whole year. But even with the Max Scherzers and Jacob deGroms and the year that they had that year, winning 101 games, etc., you still felt that, we're not better than the Yankees. You could argue, this go-around, that the Mets are maybe just a slight better, and not just by record, but overall, better than the Yankees. I will never believe that until the Mets are a juggernaut. But all I'll say is this. Soto's going to get booed to the high heavens. That was even brought up yesterday in the live stream on whether or not he should play right field. Because the bleacher creatures and everybody in right field, he's going to have to put in earplugs because he is going to hear it like he's never heard it before. And all I can hope for, whatever it is that he hears from the Yankee fan, that he channels that to a series where he goes 8 for 15 with 3 homers and 9 RBIs. That would be a way to shut up the Yankee fan. But Soto, I don't think he's faced any kind of pressure, even when he went back to Washington for the first time, when he got traded from the Nationals to San Diego. I'm sure it wasn't anything, not going to be anything close to that. So I'll be on all over that this weekend to see how he's going to perform, to see how the team will play, etc. And if you're the Mets, listen, with the way you played this year, 2 out of 3. Last year, you were only hoping not to get embarrassed, considering, remember, the Mets had the slow start. They were coming out of it in the latter part of June, and then obviously in July, they were hitting their stride to where they swept the Yankees and embarrassed them last year. One of the 4 games were close. All the other games were blowouts. I mean, who would have thought? And if the Yankees and their players have long memories, I'm sure they're going to think back to that, knowing that they were literally embarrassed. And I'm sure they're going to want to give a little payback. So this is going to be a little bit of a playoff / World Series atmosphere that I'm looking forward to. I know the weather Sunday is going to be great, iffy tomorrow and Saturday. So let's see how that's going to play out. That should be an electric atmosphere and certainly one that's going to be a snake pit there on 161st and River. So I'm looking forward to that. As far as the sport overall, the Twins, where does this come from? They've now won 10 in a row. They are now 3 games over 500. And with the way they performed, you would think that they'd be close to first place. Not in the least. They are still in 4th place in their division. And 5 in the loss, 5.5 back of the Tigers, who right now the Tigers have played well and they swept the Red Sox out of the Motor City, where the Twins, and we'll talk about the schedule in a minute to see who they play. Now, they'll close out the series against the Orioles, who have just been god-awful. But I can't believe this turnaround by Minnesota. Now, are they going to keep this up? Good for them that they play in a division which is very competitive, and even with this 10-game winning streak, are 2 games behind the Guardians in the division and 2 in the loss. And with the Royals, they're actually tied in the loss. So let's see. Now, I don't know if this is going to continue to 12 and beyond. We'll see when we take a look at the schedule. But they've been a big story here. And I get it that nobody's paying attention to the Twins. But when you win 10 in a row and you were pretty much left for dead in the AL Central, now that they've resurrected, and you would think there's going to be a cool stretch coming up. But right now, they have played as good as anybody in Major League Baseball. And then you have the AL West, which right now is in a frenzy, considering that the Mariners lost 2 out of 3 to the Yankees. The Astros and even the Rangers, they've won 5 in a row. With the Athletics far behind, those 4 teams are separated by 2 in the loss and 1.5 games in the standings. So I get it. We're still 10 days away from Memorial Day, and that's really the first barometer of where we'll look at here in the regular season, as a lot of these teams are now past the quarter pole of the baseball season. But that's also a division to look out for as one that could really be, unlike some of the others that everybody's going to look at the NL West, I understand. But the AL West looks like it's going to be fast and furious here as we get into the latter part of spring. And as far as that goes, with any other baseball news and notes, NL Central's the same with the Cubs and Cardinals. NL West the same with those 4 teams, although the Giants, they have hit a bit of an abutment. As you know, they got swept by the Twins over the weekend and lost 2 out of 3 to Arizona, excuse me, as they try to inch closer in the NL West as well. But for the AL East, Yankees now 3-0, have a 3.5 game lead over the Blue Jays, and we talked about the Red Sox getting swept. So that's your baseball landscape. Mets have a 2-game lead over the Phillies, 2.5. But besides that, you don't really have much that's going on in baseball other than the Pete Rose thing and obviously the Subway Series. And come to think of it, as I check to see what the latest here is in baseball, nothing much else going on here. I know Roki Sasaki now on the ILs. The Dodgers, they are a mass unit, but they continue to be the juggernaut that they are atop the NL West. But the schedule this weekend, which is interesting because, and I should have known prior to, because when I did look at the schedule, it is a rivalry weekend, which means that you're going to have nothing but whether in-state rivals, in-city rivals, and I understand it's going to get broken up a little bit because not all those rivals are in-city or in-state. For instance, you're going to have the Battle of Chicago, where the White Sox will be at Wrigley this weekend. You'll have Cleveland and Cincinnati. You'll have Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, another in-state. Mets, Yankees, as you know, we talked about that. Washington and Baltimore, there's your Beltway series. Detroit, Toronto, I understand that's not really a rivalry, but because Toronto's so close to Detroit, all you got to do is just go through that tunnel from the Motor City to T-Dot. That's what you have there. Atlanta and Boston, that goes back to when the Boston Braves, Atlanta Braves, they go up to Fenway. Tampa, Miami, in-state rival. St. Louis, Kansas City, in-state rival. Minnesota, Milwaukee, they tried to make that a bit of a rival, considering the proximity of those two. That's what you have there. Houston at Texas, understood. The Freeway Series, Angels, Dodgers, in Dodger Stadium. They're not Oakland anymore, but the Athletics in San Francisco. And then you have Seattle, San Diego, as they tried to make that a bit of a rivalry. And Colorado playing Arizona, that is a divisional rivalry. So that's your schedule. Good schedule. When you're in those cities or states, towns, etc., always one to look out for. And I would think maybe with the 4th of July, I haven't taken a peek of it, but with the 4th of July schedule, knowing that it's Mets Yankees, you may have a carbon copy of that same schedule at that time. But of course, we'll wait for that down the road when it does come to pass. All right, now let me turn my attention to the NFL as we get on the gridiron with the helmet and shoulder pads. And the schedule came out yesterday, as we all know, and all I have to say is this. First off, an apology, because on my live stream yesterday, I thought I read something that the NFL was going to schedule 2 games on Netflix Wednesday, December 17th. And I read that, or at least I thought I read that, and I said, wait a minute, why would they have 2 games, random games, on a Wednesday when it's not a holiday? As we saw last year, it was on Christmas Day, which was a Wednesday. So I thought I saw that, I thought I read that, and a big time mea culpa. I said that on the live stream. So for those that watched and said, JAYREELZ, what are you off your rocker? Again, my eyes deceived me. So my sincerest apologies, because you know me, I'm about transparency and being authentic. But the schedule, let's call it as we see it, it is a flat out mess. Now, what I mean by that, I know this is coming from somebody, get off my lawn, the old man, etc. And I understand this is 2025. So you're going to have schedules and games all over the planet. So, and I don't like that. And I understand why, as I've detailed many times here on this podcast. But this is all you need to know. This is in a nutshell. You ready for this, people? And I'm sure you're aware of this. Shout out to my guy, Kev the Viking fan, and Head Style from Minneapolis. Obviously, they both bleed purple and gold. But this is a microcosm of the NFL schedule. You ready for this? The Minnesota Vikings, who are playing the AFC North. Now they go play on the road at Pittsburgh and at Cleveland. So if you're from Minnesota, or yours truly in my case, my guy Kev, who's from the Bronx, if I said, Kev, Minnesota's playing Pittsburgh this year, and the game's going to be in Pittsburgh prior to the schedule release yesterday. Let's see if we could go to Acrisure Stadium, a.k.a. Heinz Field, and see when they're playing. We'll go check them out. Bet, sounds good. Schedule comes out. Oh, wait a second. That game is going to be played on September 29th, or 28th, I might add, at Dublin, or in Dublin at their stadium in Ireland. Whoa. I'm not going to Ireland to watch the Steelers play. It's a home game for the Steelers because the AFC has the extra game, the imbalance of schedules. Of course, 17 games, you get the picture. Now, if you're a fan of the Vikings, and obviously you're not going to go to Pittsburgh or even to Dublin for that matter, but the following week, Minnesota's playing the Cleveland Browns, another road game. Wow, Cleveland is closer to Minnesota than it is to Pittsburgh. Let's go. Hold the fort. Timeout. Minnesota's playing at Cleveland by way of Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London. So the two road games in the AFC North that maybe you thought that you'd have a chance to go visit a city or a stadium that you haven't seen, especially if you're a Viking fan from the Minneapolis area, you'll have to go to Dublin and to London to watch those two games because the Vikings will be playing back-to-back weeks overseas. Need I say more? And then you have the Chiefs playing as many as 8 games, including Thanksgiving in Dallas, including Christmas Day against Denver. And we all know the NFL trying to put the Chiefs on as much as they can because they are the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes, we get it. But the NFL won't say this, but I will. Because Travis Kelce's still on the team. And of course, he's still involved with Taylor Swift. That I believe in week 3, or maybe week 4, Kansas City is visiting New York. No, not to play the Jets, to play the Giants. Because they figure, let's capitalize on the Giants early on, because if that was Kansas City at New York week 13, 14, and the Giants are what? 3-9 at the time, nobody's going to want to watch that game. You have to flex out of the game. So therefore, you get a chance to see Kansas City at the New York Giants to where Taylor Swift could be in the tri-state area, as you saw there a couple of years ago when Kansas City played the Jets on the Sunday night. I believe it was week 4, and Taylor Swift was in the building with Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. And yes, all the Swifties can watch the Chiefs there on a Sunday night. I'm an old man, people. Maybe not old in heart and by just old from the standpoint of sports old, because the NFL, as I mentioned yesterday on my live stream, because there are games all over the map, and you have about 4 or 5 Monday night doubleheaders, which I can't stand, and you have games on all these platforms, which I've regurgitated a zillion times, people. But because it's not Sunday at 1 o'clock, or yes, you want to see what the 425 game is, or yes, what is the Sunday night game? Okay, what is the Monday night game? That's it. That's all we want. And even that could be a little bit too much. The Thursday night game, which we could throw in the garbage because they're never really a competitive or really a good, you may have good matchups, but it's never a classic or never really a good game because of the turnaround that these teams have from Sunday to Thursday, that you're not going to get 100% efficient, quality NFL games. Yeah, sometimes maybe the games are good, but generally the games aren't that good. So you have a situation where the games are compromised, the quality of games are compromised. You have the NFL swallowing up the entire sports landscape, where Christmas Day is on a Thursday, where you're going to have 3 games that day, where last year you only had the 2 games, but because it's Thursday, you have the 2 games on Netflix, shocker, and then the 1 game is going to be on Amazon Prime. And that being the night game between the Chiefs and Broncos. The other 2 games, Dallas at Washington at 1, Detroit at Minnesota at 4:30, and again, 8:15 is Denver, Kansas City. Your Thanksgiving Day games, of course, that's a game that everybody wants to see, or the schedule everybody wants to see on that day. Green Bay at Detroit, which we've seen a million times. Kansas City at Dallas, which I brought up earlier. Cincinnati at Baltimore. Very good Thursday night game. Hopefully both teams, which we would think would be competitive and in the running for maybe a division. But because it's a short week, who knows what the quality of play is going to be like. And that late in the season. And then the Black Friday game is Bears at Eagles. Not really stellar if you ask me. I get it, Ben Johnson. I get it, Caleb Williams with a newfound offense, etc. All right, fine. But still, that's not one to write home about. But here's the reason why I said that this at the top, that I'm already over it. I'm already exhausted by looking at it. Because the way that the NFL has to feed all these mouths between Netflix, Amazon, Fox, ESPN, ABC, NBC, when does it stop? That even the quality of the Sunday night games, they're not really great. Of course you're going to have good matchups, but it's not like it once was back in the day. And I get it, 2025, content is king, streaming, Peacock, I forgot about them. As you're going to see Chiefs and Chargers in Brazil the day after Dallas and Philadelphia opens up the season on a Thursday night, September 4th. That's what I mean. It's exhausting. And that's where it takes just the special nature of an NFL Sunday. There's no such thing anymore. Because these games are spread out. Because the quality of these games aren't even any good anymore. The regular season, you don't really have classic regular season games like you once did. And not to say it's all about having classic games, because obviously that's in itself is a bit of a stretch. But the point of the matter is that you want to have games that you can remember by in the regular season. Where because they're so spread out and because they spread the product so thin that you have to have your head on a swivel to watch these games on a week in, week out basis. Where we just can't concentrate on one day or 2 days. No, we got to think about a third day. And then when we get deeper into the year, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Black Friday, Saturday, which is going to interrupt the college football playoff on December 20th with 2 games then. And I believe that's what? Cowboys, Commanders, and what is the nightcap? Green Bay, Chicago. I mean, enough. But with the NFL, it's never enough. So yeah, I'm not going to go week by week. I know that this podcast is going longer than normal. Maybe I'll get into that a little bit. Maybe next Thursday, or who knows. But the NFL, I just don't want to talk about them anymore. Is there anything off the field to discuss? Derrick Henry, 2 years, $30 million. All right, so good for him as he gets paid. No surprise there, so I don't have to worry about him in my division for another 2 years at 31 years of age. But that's what you have there. And then lastly, as I break out the golf clubs, where today, and let's see if I can get an update as we move it along with the PGA, the second leg of the Grand Slams, especially after the thrilling Grand Slam at the Masters to start off the golf year, as we all know, with Rory McIlroy getting the career Grand Slam. And guess what, people? You have another scenario with another golfer that is trying to achieve what Rory McIlroy did just a month ago. And that would be one Jordan Spieth. Spieth, if you recall, in 2015 won the Masters in the US Open. And then in 2017 won the formerly known as the British Open, but the Open Championship. And since then has gone on a drought in his own fashion, because since then, I don't even believe he's won another major. No, I take that back. I think he has. Let me pull that up to be precise. No, I think he only has the 3 majors. Is that right? Let me just make sure. Don't want to not put myself ahead of thinking that Jordan Spieth has not had a major since then. Yeah, his last major championship was the Open. And as I pull up the majors, hold on. So as I look this up, this is a guy that is trying to be the 7th player in golf history to have a career Grand Slam. And I know Jordan Spieth is not a magnet like Rory McIlroy, who is pretty much the mouthpiece for the PGA, considering what had transpired between he and Liv and all that. And because he had that going on 11-year drought, a guy that started off like a bang, similar to Jordan Spieth early on in his career. And now that he's hit this drought, it's interesting how there's a parallel between he and McIlroy trying to get that Grand Slam and trying to also snap this long major victory drought that he is right now the story going into this tournament. If it wasn't because that he needed this final tournament in order for him to get that career slam, it would just be Jordan Spieth. It wouldn't even be a story. But because it is, and moving forward, now mind you, the PGA out of all the tournaments is probably fourth in the pecking order. Now, obviously with McIlroy, the Masters is the Masters. And knowing that he needed to get that final crown jewel, the Super Bowl of golf, to get that tournament, that win, in order for him to get that career slam, that's what made it even more dramatic. And how that finished, etc., was just thrilling golf. And we can only hope for the same this weekend with Jordan Spieth. Do I think it's going to happen? I don't think so. I'm sure Spieth, he may come out of the gate flying, but Spieth has not really been near the top or at the top of these leaderboards on a consistent level to think that maybe he could be in the running. So I don't think Spieth is going to be anywhere near the top. So as far as McIlroy, I want to get to him real quick. Now you wonder, with the piano off his back, is he going to now roll off, maybe not consecutively, of course, but is he going to roll off 4 or 5 majors here over the next 5 years or so? Because now the pressure has been the air has been let out of the balloon. There isn't anything that McIlroy could do. He could not make the cut for the rest of his life, but he's good. Because he doesn't have to have that hanging over his head. I haven't won a major in 10 years. I need to win the Masters to get my career slam. That's it. Over. Done. So he can go 0 for forever, and he'd still be riding off into the sunset. So let's see if McIlroy, how he's going to perform here, and whether or not that momentum from last month is going to carry on to this month and maybe not win the PGA, but could be at the top of the leaderboard and maybe even threaten to win another major tournament. And like I said, the PGA is fourth on the pecking order. It's Masters first. Now, the Open, because of its history, you would think that's going to be second, although the U.S. Open, obviously, that is a major tournament. I mean, they're all major, even the PGA, but that pecking order is Masters. I'd say the Open Championship, right behind it being the U.S. Open, and then the PGA. And remember, the PGA used to be set in July, but they moved it up to May because they wanted to have the consecutive months of the major tournaments, which at first I kind of liked, but I wish they would go back to playing that in August, not July, because obviously the Open is in July. They should play that in August because it extends the golf season. The golf season is over in the middle of July. So when Wimbledon concludes, pretty much a golf season concludes right after that, where in tennis, you still have the U.S. Open to watch. So that's the thing that I look at when it comes to the 4 major tournaments. But as far as this one in particular, we know about Spieth and McIlroy, but Scottie Scheffler is a guy that a lot of people are looking at here. He won the Byron Nelson a couple of weeks ago. Maybe that momentum could carry him into this tournament to maybe possibly be at the top or maybe even win. Now with Scheffler, we know what he's done at the start of these years, over the last couple of years, more so 23 and 24, 25 not so much, as he's won a lot of those tournaments prior to the Masters, and as we all know, he's won the Masters twice. But outside of that, he hasn't done anything. Now, he's been close. He's been near the top or at the top going into, let's say, the weekend or the final round, but he has come up short as far as him winning another major tournament. So to me, Scottie Scheffler is another big-time storyline to see whether or not that he could finally get another major under his belt outside of Augusta, because we have not seen. It's almost like he's the Iga Świątek, although Świątek has won another tournament outside of the French Open, which the French Open is going to commence, a week from this coming Monday. So let's see if Scheffler could get back on the beam and maybe be in the running for another major tournament outside of the Masters. So we'll take a peek at who's at the top here. As of right this moment, now you have a few golfers that have gone 15 or even 16 for that matter. I'm sure a lot of the big-time golfers, they haven't teed off just yet or will tee off soon as I'm recording this because it's still mid-morning. But as of right this second, what we have here in progress, at the top of the leaderboard, no, I did not want that as I'm clicking. That's for me to watch it. No, that'd be nice, but no thanks. So right now at the top of your leaderboard as of right this second is Ryan Fox. Then you have Alex Noren, who are 5 under, followed by Luke Donald, David Puig, JT Poston at -4, and the last two being at 3 under. So, like I said, you're going to have a lot of the big guys tee off a little bit later on. You know the guys. So, John Rahm is one guy who's through 12. He's 1 under. Keegan Bradley's at 3 under. Players of note, Matt Fitzpatrick at 3 under. Keegan Bradley 3 under. So, yes, we'll wait to see, obviously, the Schefflers, the McIlroys, the Koepkas, the DeChambeaus, etc., and how they perform here. And, of course, we'll recap this all come Monday. Now, who I think will win? I don't know if Scheffler's going to win. I don't think McIlroy's going to win. Didn't Schauffele win this last year? I believe he did. He won the PGA and the U.S. Open back-to-back, if I'm not mistaken. So I won't say he'll go back-to-back here. What the hell? He didn't fare well in the Masters. I'll say Cameron Smith, and I believe he's in this tournament. So before I even jump the gun here, Cameron Smith, has he even teed off yet? Schauffele's 2 over right now. Koepka's 5 over. Jeez, is he really that bad so far? And you still have Cam Davis, Cam Smith. Anyway, Cameron Young. What the hell? I'll come out and say, as I'm still scrolling here, and I know I'm killing more time, Cameron Smith, yes, he tees off at 209. I'm going to say Cameron Smith is going to be your winner of the PGA this year. And I'm just throwing that out there because Scheffler, I don't think so. McIlroy, I don't think so. Maybe DeChambeau when it's all said and done. But I'll say Cameron Smith will win the 2025 PGA Tournament. All right, that was a long one, people. I know. Thank you so much. If you stuck with me this long, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what I have to say about what goes on in the wonderful world of sports. And as I mention every time out, if you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, review, throw me a few stars, write a review, Apple, Spotify podcasts. Of course, the website, JAYREELZ.com, the YouTube channel. Please subscribe there, at JAYREELZ. I have content, as you well know, 2 podcasts a week, Monday and Thursday. A live stream every Wednesday, high noon Eastern time. I have on-site or on-location interviews with fans, with the other one coming, rain permitting or weather permitting, Friday at Yankee Stadium or outside of Yankee Stadium. So if you see me, wave, say hello, be a part of the video. I have critique videos that are coming. And you're saying critique? Who am I going to critique? Well, you have to stay tuned to the channel because I'll post that or any of my social media accounts. Lifestyle content, I got that coming up the pike. I know I haven't put up anything lifestyle in regards to that, and I know I like that's a little bit of a twist away from the sports because I'm sure people are like, JAYREELZ had enough of the sports. Can you give me some lifestyle stuff? I got that coming down the pike. All of it, people. On all, not only just those platforms, but the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ, as I'm slowly but surely inching closer. I'm 365 away from 1,000 so I can start monetizing. Because whether you do or do not know, I'm an independent podcaster, content creator. This is my full-time job. I took the leap 15 months ago. Not generating any income as of yet. People can say, well, JAYREELZ, 15 months, what's going on? Obviously, I got a lot on my plate. I'm a one-man operation, no excuse. I want all this smoke. But with that being said, not only am I a producer, I'm a host, I'm an editor of this podcast, but I also edit my own video on top of trying to market, trying to post on social media, trying to advertise, trying to be all those hats, everything under one umbrella. So it can be a little tricky, people, because as much as I want to focus in on trying to get guests, sponsorships, partnerships, all of those things, it is a challenge. It's not a complaint, though. But because I have all of those duties that are on my plate, it can be a little challenging. So your support is not highly needed. It is needed to the utmost. Take a screenshot when I post on social media. Share it with your family, friends, foes, frenemies. the casual sports fan, the diehard sports fan, the kook like I am, or even just the good sports fan, the one that's like sports, doesn't follow it, but certainly could use a little bit of entertainment or just a bit of another outlet that they could support an independent podcaster like yours truly. So with that being said, again, just please support the podcast. Follow on my social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ podcast, or JAYREELZ on Instagram as well. Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just the number. If you want to hit me up with a question, comment, suggestion, you can hit me up on all the aforementioned social media accounts, the YouTube channel, etc. And the email is thejreelspodcast@gmail.com. You know I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do. This is why I quit my job, to do this, to pursue my passion, to do what it is that I love. Talking sports in the blood, in the DNA since birth, with nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury, with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.